This is Recipe for Sleep, a podcast where we dust off very old cookbooks and let them lull us into dreamland. Happy 2025. I'm so glad to be back in your ears after a short break for the holidays. I'm Erin Brindley, a chef and storyteller. If you're new to the podcast, I read old cookbooks, mostly from the late 1800s and early 1900s, softly and sweetly until you fall asleep. I launched this drowsy little project in 2024 weekly, but sometimes in fits and starts. We're changing things a bit for the new year. We'll have a new episode out every other Wednesday evening. This will give me more time to get more of my own recipes up on banksalt.com, and I'm brewing up another sleepy idea you'll hear more about soon. Meanwhile, I'm so excited to start this year with the humble and delightful Bread Making and Bread Baking by Minnie E. Brothers from 1915. This cookbook is perfect to fall asleep to. There are so many wonderful basic tips for baking, all perfectly practical for the home cook, cozy and unsurprising. She moves on to savory things towards the end of the book, but I think tonight we'll just get through her baking section. It's been a bit since we just listened to baking recipes, and I find them the most soothing. So turn the lights out, put away anything you were doing, and snuggle deep into your sweet covers. Imagine the kitchen of your mind. There are 2 cupboards there. Yesterday's cupboard for all the things that have already happened that your mind wants to chew on. And tomorrow's cupboard for all the things you're going to do or what's going to happen later. It's time to put everything away in those cupboards. Imagine closing each one. You made it. To this cozy, quiet time of day where there's nothing to do but listen to me read you old cookbooks until you drift off to sleep. Minnie is going to start us off with a nice intro with a sweet poem and some history and science of wheat. Then we'll get right into her lovely recipes. Bread making and bread baking. Embracing selections in pastry, general cooking, canning, preserving, pickling, jelly making, and candy making. Minnie E. Brothers, Minneapolis, 1915. Preface. The recipes contained in this booklet are not intended for the graduate of culinary art or the one who plies domestic science on a scientific principle. This little book, in its simple and unpretentious way, is dedicated to the housewife who is dealing with the perplexities of preparing the meals. Its aim is to help the one whose larder is not always provisioned with a great variety of fancy groceries, as well as the one whose training for this duty is unfortunately limited. The author contributes a few recipes that are original, but in the main, old recipes written anew, improved upon, and simplified is all that is claimed herein. It is hoped and believed that this book will be of some assistance and lighten the burden of the one who makes the home the faithful household cook. A tribute to the world's heroine. The world is always praising all the great folk of the time, the poets and musicians, and the ministers sublime. But the earth's greatest heroine, they never cast a look. I'll tell you, she is at once the blessed household cook. We hear a lot of lauding for the man who goes to war, the artist and the sculptor, the poet and his lore, the lawyer and inventor, and the author's famous book. But we never hear a word about the blessed household cook. Perhaps you think she isn't worth the praise that I would give. But without her ceaseless kindness, pray, how long would you live? We all would soon expire, if of food we never partook. So I raise my hat in honor of the blessed household cook. She saves the lives of thousands by her duties every day. But she does it in a simple and unnoticed, quiet way. But when I am an author, I shall surely write a book about the queen of womankind, the worthy household cook. Alice M. Jones, in Farm and Home. Bread. Bread, the staff of life by common consent, occupies first place as an article of food in all homes by all peoples of the civilized and much of the uncivilized world. Bread dates back before the beginning of history. The scriptures in early Bible times frequently mention bread, also unleavened bread of the Jews used in the Passover. In Genesis 18:6 we read, Abraham hastened into the tent unto Sarah and said, Make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and bake cakes upon the earth. History tells us of the ancient Egyptians, who knew the art of bread making, of the Greeks and Romans, who had many bakeries, and bread and cakes were made in great variety. In the Chaldean ruins, well-built ovens and perfect grinding stones for reducing grain are found. The earliest bread makers were the lake dwellers that inhabited Switzerland in the Stone Age. Loaves baked on hot stones were found. Perhaps the earliest record of the grinding of grain and bread made from it comes from China. The Chinese were bread makers 4,500 years ago. Judging from what we read of it, the bread question is an old one. Leavened bread, as far as the leavening is concerned, is made the same today as it was in early times. Fermented, or sourdough as it is commonly called, is the leavening used. Sourdough is made by taking a small portion of dough, say 3 or 4 ounces from a baking, and putting it away until the next baking day, then mixing it with fresh dough. It will leaven the whole lump. Bread made in this way usually has a sour taste. For a long time, bread making has been considered an art, and it may be added that to make a good wholesome loaf of bread is the greatest of household arts. The baking of nicely browned, plump loaves of bread always challenges attention and is always admired. Some authorities on domestic art claim that to be successful in bread making, one must know the chemistry of yeast and flour. In fact, bread making and all the scientific principles. This booklet does not treat on the chemistry of bread making, but on the most simple, practical, successful home methods. It is desirable, though not necessary, that one who bakes understands something about flour as well as yeast. It is now nearly 300 years since yeast was first used, and while our ancestors made a good palatable bread, it was not until recent years that the art of bread making attained any degree of perfection. This, of course, is largely made possible by the modern method of milling wheat and making flour. All brands of patent process flour made from spring wheat is standard and the best for bread making. By spring wheat is meant wheat sown in the spring. It is chiefly grown in the northwestern states and Canada. Flour of this wheat is generally called hard wheat flour, It is rich in gluten and the most perfect bread flour. It is of a creamy color, not white or gray in color, which indicates poor flour. Winter wheat is soft wheat and is grown in all parts of the U.S., principally in the western, southern, and eastern states. Flour made from winter wheat is called soft wheat flour and is used in breads, pastry, and macaroni. It contains less gluten, but is rich in starch. The best flour, perhaps in all the world, is made in Minneapolis and shipped to all parts of America and many foreign countries. The leading brands are Occident, Gold Medal, Sarasota, and Pillsbury's Best. Bread making. Dry yeast. Into a cup of lukewarm water, put a teaspoon of sugar and 1.5 cakes of yeast. Let soak at least 1 hour. Have prepared 2 cups of finely mashed potatoes. Turn on them half a pint of boiling water and stir in a heaping tablespoon of flour. Stir well and let batter cool. Add a cup of yeast, beat well, cover, and let stand until morning. Sponge. To 3 pints of warm water, add enough flour to make a stiff batter. Stir in the yeast prepared the night before, which will now make a medium batter. Beat thoroughly for 5 or 6 minutes. Cover. Set in a warm place, out of draft, to rise, which under ordinary conditions will be light in 1.5 to 2 hours. Kneading. A bread mixer may be used, but if the kneading is done by hand, begin mixing with a heavy spoon. Sift in 1 sifter of flour, stir, add 1 cup of sugar, 1/2 cup of lard, more flour, and heaping tablespoon of salt. Stir and add flour gradually until dough becomes too stiff to use the spoon. Remove to floured kneading board or finish kneading in the bread pan, which is now done by hand. Sift in flour gradually, knead steadily. Remove all particles of dough from sides and bottom of pan. Knead for 20 minutes or more. When in right condition, dough will be elastic and spongy and will not be inclined to stick to the hands. When kneading is done, there should be no flour left in the pan. Cover first with bread pan cover, then with tablecloth, or better, a cloth for the purpose. Set to rise in a warm place, out of hot or cold drafts. It should be light in 2 to 3 hours. Temperature of room should be 72 to 80 degrees. Putting into loaves. Grease the baking pans well. Use the sheet iron or iron enamelware, as they are better bakers. For a single loaf, take about 2 pounds of dough, and about 1.5 pounds when double loaves are baked in a pan. Mold each into a shape and place in pan. Brush top with lard or butter and set to rise in even temperature. Cover with a light cloth. Under favorable conditions, the bread will be up and double its size in 3/4 of an hour, sometimes less. Baking. Put the bread in a moderately hot oven. Bake until nicely browned over top, which will take 15 minutes. Then reduce the heat about half. To prevent scorching during the latter part of baking, place a sheet of brown or white paper over the bread. Bake 1 hour. Remove from pans. Place on cloth to cool. Brush lightly while hot with butter. If bread raises too long, it will be porous and dry. If it is very slow in rising, it will be dry or tough, soggy, and inclined to be sour. Olive oil can be used in bread in place of lard or other shortening. It is much better. Use it in the same quantity or a little less. Bread. Compressed yeast. Dissolve 2 cakes of compressed yeast in half a cup of lukewarm water. Rice or mash 3 or 4 medium-sized boiled potatoes, and add a heaping tablespoon flour. Put this into a bread pan and turn in 1 quart boiling water and beat up well. When cooled to lukewarm, turn in yeast and stir in enough flour to make a medium batter. Beat briskly a few minutes and set away in warm place to rise. Dough. When light, add some flour, half cup sugar, half cup lard, stirring briskly, 1 tablespoon salt, and more flour. When too stiff to stir with a spoon, finish by hand, kneading until the dough is spongy and elastic. Let rise and finish the usual way. Nut bread. Nut bread is made much the same as other bread, only different in the proportion of ingredients and the addition of nut meats. Yeast. Place in a cup of lukewarm water 1½ cakes dry yeast and 1 teaspoon of sugar. Soak 1 hour. To 1 cup of mashed potatoes, add 1 tablespoon of flour and 1 cup of boiling water. Stir, and when cool, add yeast. Mix well, and let set overnight in a warm place. Sponge. Add to the yeast 1 quart of lukewarm water and flour to make a sponge batter. Cover and set away to rise. When light, add 1 to 1½ cups sugar, 3/4 cup lard or butter, 1½ cups nut meats, and knead as any other bread, adding flour as needed. Graham bread. On baking day, a few loaves of graham bread can be made conveniently by making more bread sponge, using an extra yeast cake, and more moisture. For graham bread, take 1 quart of bread sponge, half to 1 cup of brown sugar, half cup shortening, 1 heaping teaspoon salt, and equal amounts of flour and graham flour. Sift in as long as the batter can be stirred with a heavy spoon, beat briskly, and set to raise. When light, put in greased pans, and when light again, bake in a quick oven, reducing heat in 10 or 15 minutes. Whole wheat flour may be used instead of graham. Boston brown bread. Half cup brown sugar, half cup molasses, 2 eggs, 2 cups sour milk, 1 teaspoon soda, 1 cup cornmeal, 1 cup graham or rye, 1 cup flour, 1 teaspoon baking powder, 1 teaspoon salt. Steam 3 to 4 hours. Brown bread steamed. Half cup sugar, half cup molasses, half teaspoon soda, 2 eggs, 2 cups milk, 1 cup seedless raisins, 2 cups cornmeal, 1 cup flour, 2 teaspoons baking powder, 1 teaspoon salt, 3 tablespoons hot shortening. Mix ingredients in order named, with raisins dredged in flour and hot shortening last. Turn in greased mold and steam about 4 hours. Brown bread, baked. Half cup brown sugar, half cup molasses, 1 cup raisins, 2 cups sour milk, 1 cup flour, 2 cups graham flour, 2 tablespoons shortening, 1 teaspoon salt, 2 teaspoons soda, 1 egg. Work sugar, shortening, and molasses together. Add beaten egg and sour milk with soda dissolved in it. Stir in flour, salt, and graham, and lastly, the raisins dredged in flour. Beat well and turn in greased pans and let rise 1 hour before baking. Rye bread. Yeast. 1 cake dry yeast, 1 teaspoon sugar, ½ cup warm water. Soak ½ hour. Sponge. 3 cups warm water. Rye flour to make batter. Cup dissolved yeast. Stir well and let rise. Dough. 2 cups warm water. 3 cups flour. 1 tablespoon salt. ½ cup lard. Rye flour to make a soft dough. Knead thoroughly and handle dough roughly by striking or pounding with hands. Let rise. Mold into loaves. Brush top with white of egg and water. Let rise and bake in slow oven. Parker House rolls. Sponge. Dissolve 1 cake dry yeast in ½ cup lukewarm water. Add teaspoon sugar and let stand ½ an hour. Scald 1 pint of milk. When cool, add cup yeast and flour to make a medium batter. Cover and let rise. Dough. To the sponge, stir in 2 or 3 tablespoons sugar. Piece butter the size of an egg melted or softened. 1 teaspoon salt, and gradually add flour enough to make a soft dough, kneading when dough becomes too stiff to stir with a spoon. Let rise, knead down, and let rise again. Rolls. Flatten out the dough to about ½ inch thickness. Cut round or oval. Brush top slightly with melted butter and crease through center with the back of a knife. Fold and press edges together. Put in baking pan with space between. Let rise, baking about 20 minutes in a quick oven. Baking powder biscuits. 2 cups flour, ½ cup shortening, 2 teaspoons baking powder, 3/4 cup milk or water, salt. Mix dry ingredients and work in the shortening, then the milk or water. Use a fork, spoon, or the hands, but do not knead. As quickly as possible, place the soft dough on a floured board. Roll lightly to 3/4 inch thickness. Use a biscuit cutter. Bake 15 to 20 minutes. Muffins. 2 cups flour, 2 eggs, 1 cup milk, 2 rounding teaspoons baking powder, 2 rounding teaspoons shortening, 1 rounding teaspoon sugar. Beat the eggs well, add milk, then stir in the mixed and sifted dry ingredients. Now turn in the melted shortening, which should be hot. Stir until well mixed. Turn at once into gem irons or muffin pans that are well greased and smoking hot. Fill pans half full. Bake 15 to 20 minutes. Serve hot. Graham gems. ½ cup flour. 1½ cup graham flour. 1½ cup milk. ½ cup sugar. 2 eggs. 2 heaping teaspoons baking powder, 2 rounded teaspoons shortening, salt. Proceed as with muffins. Sour milk gems. 1 pint sour milk, 1 teaspoon soda, flour, salt, shortening. Dissolve soda in a little water. Add to sour milk, or buttermilk may be used. Stir in flour enough to make medium batter. Minneapolis Johnny Cake. 2 cups cornmeal, 1 cup flour, 1 cup boiled pumpkin, 3/4 cup sugar, 3/4 cup boiling water, 1 cup sour milk, 1 scant teaspoon soda, 1 scant teaspoon salt, ½ teaspoon cinnamon, 4 teaspoons baking powder, 1 or 2 eggs. Pour the boiling water over the cornmeal, stir, add sugar and pumpkin, then the sour milk with soda dissolved in it, flour sifted with the baking powder, the beaten eggs, and seasoning. Beat briskly. Turn into a buttered tin. Bake. Pointers for pastry. For fancy cakes and pastry, use pastry flour if it can be had. The cake will be lighter and the pie crust more flaky. Good housekeepers, however, use a good grade of bread flour for bread, cake, and general baking purposes with never a failure. 2 points essential in cake making are attention and preparation. To be prepared, the working utensils should be clean and within reach. The materials used in the cake should be of the best quality. Your attention should not be interrupted by any other work. Speed in stirring up a cake adds to its success. Use fresh, sweet butter, fresh eggs, good baking powder, and a good brand of flavoring extracts. The general rule for mixing a butter cake or any cake made with butter is as follows. Cream the butter, and when beaten lightly, gradually add the sugar, beating briskly until creamy. The yolks of eggs, well beaten, should now be added. Beat well, and add the flavoring extracts. Sift flour, mixed with baking powder and salt, several times. Add flour and liquid alternately, and when well beaten, fold in the lightly beaten whites of eggs, and then the fruit, if any is used. For cakes without butter, beat the yolks of eggs very light. Add sugar slowly, beating until spongy. Add the flavoring and what liquid may be used. The whites of eggs beaten to a froth, folded in alternately with the flour, which has been mixed with baking powder and salt, and sifted several times. Baking and helps. Have a moderate oven for baking sponge and angel cakes. Have a hot oven for baking cookies and layer cakes. Have a moderate oven for baking loaf, pound, and fruit cakes. The pans for baking medium-sized loaf cakes should be greased and dusted with flour. The pans for baking large loaf, pound, and fruit cakes should be lined with 2 or 3 thicknesses of greased paper. The batter should be spread evenly when turned into baking tin. To test in baking a cake, pierce the center with a broom splint. If it comes out dry and clean, the cake is done. To test the oven, A moderately heated oven will scorch a piece of white paper to a light brown in 5 minutes. A hot oven will scorch it to a dark brown in 5 minutes. Sift flour once before it is measured. Then add baking powder and salt, and sift 2 or 3 more times. All measurements are level, unless otherwise mentioned. Standard measuring cup. 1 cup flour equals 1/4 pound. 1 cup sugar equals 1/2 pound. 1 cup butter solid equals 1/2 pound. 1 cup liquid equals 1/2 pound. 1 cup liquid equals 2 gills. 1 cup liquid equals 4 wine glasses. 1 cup liquid equals 16 tablespoons. 4 salt spoons equals 1 teaspoon. 2 to 3 teaspoons equals 1 tablespoon. 3 tablespoons equals 1 ounce flour. 2 tablespoons equals 1 ounce liquid. 2 tablespoons equals 1 ounce butter. 1.5 tablespoons equals 1 ounce sugar. Level measurements. Coffee cake. 1 quart bread sponge, flour. 3/4 cup sugar. 1/2 cup butter. 1/2 cup raisins. 2 eggs. Nutmeg and salt. Add some flour to sponge. Stir in sugar, butter, raisins and other ingredients, and flour enough to make a stiff dough by kneading. Let rise. When light, flatten out in baking tins. Brush top with melted butter and sprinkle with sugar and cinnamon. Let rise and bake. Coffee cake. 1 quart of bread sponge, or make a sponge of 1 cake of dry yeast, 2 pints scalded in cooled milk, or 1 pint water. After rising, add flour and knead. Let rise. When light, work in 3/4 cup sugar and 1/2 cup butter creamed together, and 2 or 3 beaten eggs, a teaspoon salt, a few gratings of nutmeg, and a few raisins if liked. Flatten out in shallow baking tins and sprinkle with sugar, cinnamon, and a few bits of butter. Let rise and bake. Dutcher Kaffee Kuchen. Yeast. 1 cake dry yeast, 1 teaspoon sugar, 1/2 cup lukewarm water. Soak 1/2 hour. Sponge. To 1.5 pints scalded milk, cooled, add dissolved yeast and flour to make a medium batter. Let rise. Dough. Stir in some flour, mix with about 2 cups combined raisins, currants, and nut meats. 3/4 cup butter, creamed, with 1.5 cups sugar. Beat well, adding flour to make a stiff batter. 3 or 4 beaten eggs, 1 teaspoon salt, 1/4 teaspoon nutmeg. Beat 10 to 15 minutes. Have tins about 2 inches deep and fill half full. Sprinkle top with sugar and cinnamon. Let rise and bake 3/4 to 1 hour in moderate oven. Cake. Fruit cake. 1 1/4 pound sugar. 1 pound butter. 1 pound flour. 1 pound seeded raisins. 1 pound sultana raisins. 1 pound currants. 1 pound chopped dates. 1 cup black walnuts. 1/2 pound citron. 4 teaspoons baking powder. 1 teaspoon cinnamon. 1 teaspoon cloves. 1/2 cup molasses. 8 to 10 eggs. Juice of 3 oranges. Cream the sugar and butter. Add the well-beaten yolks of the eggs and the flour sifted with baking powder. Stir in the fruit, molasses, and spices. The citron may be sliced very thin or run through a food chopper. Add the orange juice. Fold in the well-beaten whites of eggs. Bake 3 to 4 hours in the long, narrow, and deep aluminum pan that has been buttered and floured. Bake on oven grate with moderate heat. After 1 hour, reduce heat. Dark fruit cake. 1 pound sugar, 1 pound flour, 1 pound butter, 1 pound currants, ½ pound citron, 2 pounds raisins, 10 eggs, 1 cup New Orleans molasses, 1 cup black walnut meats, 1 teaspoon ground cloves, 2 teaspoons cinnamon, 2 teaspoons baking powder, 2 ground nutmegs, 1 teaspoon soda, juice 2 or 3 lemons. Light fruit cake. 1 pound sugar, 1½ pound butter, 1 pound sultana raisins, ½ pound citron, ½ pound figs, 2½ cups flour, 1 cup milk, 2 cups black walnuts, 2 cups coconut, 2 teaspoons baking powder, whites of 6 or 8 eggs. Pound cake. 1 pound sugar, 1 pound butter, 1 pound flour, 1 pound eggs, 10. Almond or vanilla. Cream the yolks of the eggs with the sugar, also the butter, with part of the flour. When this is done, combine the 2 mixtures and fold in the well-beaten whites of the 10 eggs. Flavor. Bake as a loaf. Silver cake or seafoam cake. 2 cups powdered sugar, 1 cup butter, 1 cup cornstarch, whites of 6 eggs, 2 cups pastry flour, 1 cup milk, 2 teaspoons baking powder, 1 teaspoon almond extract. Gold cake or sunshine cake. 2 cups sugar, 2½ cups flour, 1 cup milk, 1 cup butter, 1 teaspoon cream tartar, ½ teaspoon soda, 2 teaspoons vanilla, yolks of 11 eggs. Sour cream cake. 1 cup sour cream, 1½ cup flour, 1 cup sugar, ½ teaspoon soda, 1 teaspoon vanilla, 2 eggs, salt. Bake as layer or loaf cake. This makes a nice spice cake by omitting vanilla and adding ½ teaspoon ground cloves, ½ teaspoon cinnamon, ½ teaspoon nutmeg. Sponge cake. 5 eggs, 2 cups sugar, 1 teaspoon vanilla, 2 cups flour, 2 teaspoons baking powder, 1 cup hot water, 1/4 teaspoon salt. Beat whites and yolks of eggs separately, then together. Beat in the sugar gradually, then the flour sifted with salt and baking powder. When well beaten, add the flavoring and the cup of hot water, mixing quickly. Turn into buttered and heated pan. Bake. Sponge cake. Beat the yolks of 4 eggs. Add 1 cup sugar, Beat until creamy. Add 3 tablespoons water. Place in a cup 1½ tablespoons of cornstarch, 1 teaspoon baking powder, and fill with flour. Sift twice. Combine the 2 mixtures. Beat well. Stir in 1 teaspoon of lemon juice and a pinch of salt. Fold in the well-beaten whites of 4 eggs. Bake about 30 minutes. Spice cake. 1 cup sugar. ½ cup butter. 1 cup sour milk. 1/4 teaspoon soda. 1 cup sweet milk. 2 teaspoons baking powder. ½ teaspoon nutmeg. 1 teaspoon cinnamon. ½ teaspoon cloves. 3/4 cup black walnut meats chopped. 2 cups flour. Wedding cake. 1 pound or 2 cups sugar. 1 pound butter. 1 pound flour. 1 seeded raisins. 1 pound currants. 1 pound bleached sultana raisins. 1 pound figs or dates. ½ pound citron, candied. ½ pound orange or lemon, candied. 1 teaspoon nutmeg. 1 teaspoon cinnamon. ½ teaspoon mace. 2 cups blanched almonds. 1 cup black walnut meats. 3 oranges, juice. 1 lemon, juice and grated rind. 8 to 10 eggs. Cream butter with part of sugar, and yolks of eggs with balance of sugar. Combine 2 mixtures. Add orange juice, grated rind, and juice of lemon, and all the flour except part of a cup in which have been mixed the spices, and dredge the small fruits that have been previously prepared. Stir and add the chopped nut meats, citron, and orange peel, cut or chipped thin. Mix well and fold in the well-beaten whites of the eggs. This may be baked in 1 or 2 oblong pans, which should be lined with 3 thicknesses of buttered paper. Like any fruit cake, it is much better baked 2 or 3 weeks before used. Number 1, layer or white cake. 2 cups sugar, 3/4 cup butter, 3 cups flour, 2 teaspoons baking powder, whites of 8 eggs, 3/4 cup milk, ½ teaspoon lemon extract, ½ teaspoon vanilla extract, cream sugar and butter. Add milk and extracts. Mix baking powder with flour and sift several times. Stir it in alternately with the beaten whites, stirring always one way, and beat well. Bake in buttered and floured cake tin. Number 2, layer or white cake. 2 cups sugar, 3/4 cup butter, 1 cup milk, 3 cups flour, 2½ teaspoons baking powder, 5 eggs, vanilla, salt, cream butter and sugar. Add milk slowly, then flour sifted with baking powder. Fold in the stiffly beaten whites of eggs, adding the flavoring. Bake in layers or loaf. Good with banana or any fruit filling. Birthday cake. A very good birthday cake for children may be made from this recipe. 2 cups sugar, 3½ cups flour, 3/4 cup milk, 2/3 cup butter, 1 heaping teaspoon baking powder, 2 tablespoons ground mace, ½ teaspoon salt, 3 eggs. Cream, butter, and sugar. Add yolks well beaten. Mix the dry ingredients. Sieve 3 or 4 times. Then add to the creamed mixture with the milk. Stir well. Then fold in the frothy whites of 3 eggs. Bake as a layer cake, or if made in a loaf cake, line deep cake tin with buttered paper. Then turn in layer of batter. Sprinkle with chopped figs and black walnut meats. Turn in more batter, then more figs and nut meats as before. Tin should be about 2/3 full. Bake in slow oven about 40 minutes. Frost with cream frosting. Decorate with candies. Ginger cakes. 1 cup brown sugar. 1 cup light New Orleans molasses. 1 cup sour cream. 1 teaspoon soda. 2 eggs. 2 cups flour. 1 teaspoon ginger. 1 teaspoon cinnamon. 1 teaspoon salt. Half cup nut meats or 1 cup raisins. Bake as drop cakes or loaf cake. Jelly roll cake. 1½ cup sugar. 2 eggs. Half cup butter. 1 cup milk. 2 cups flour. 3 teaspoons baking powder. Cream butter and slowly add sugar, then the well-beaten eggs. Add some flour after being sifted with baking powder, then a part of milk and flour alternately until it is all stirred in. Beat briskly. Bake in thin layers in large, shallow tins. Spread with currant jelly and roll. Gingerbread. 3 cups flour. 1 cup molasses. Half cup brown sugar. Half cup shortening. 1 cup water. 1 cup raisins. 2 teaspoons ginger. 1 teaspoon cinnamon. 1 teaspoon saleratus. 2 eggs. Salt. Mix together sugar, shortening, molasses, ginger, cinnamon, and salt. Add the water hot with saleratus dissolved in it. Add flour, stirring until quite smooth. Stir in the raisins and the well-beaten eggs. Bake slowly. Ginger cookies. 1 cup brown sugar. 1 cup New Orleans molasses. 1 cup butter. 2 eggs. Half cup milk. 1 teaspoon soda. 2 teaspoons ginger. 1 teaspoon cinnamon. Half teaspoon salt. Flour to make a soft dough. Roll out quickly and bake in a moderate oven. Ginger cookies. Beat 1 cup batter, half cup sugar, 2 cups molasses until well mixed. Dissolve 2 teaspoons soda in 4 tablespoons of hot water. Stir it into 1 cup sour milk. Add milk to above mixture with 1 teaspoon of ginger, a little salt, 2 teaspoons of ground cloves, and the grated rind of a lemon if wanted. Mix. Stir in the flour to make a stiff dough. Roll out thin. Bake in floured tins in moderate oven. These cookies will keep nicely for a week if kept in a stone crock. Molasses cookies. 2 cups molasses. 1 cup milk or water. 3/4 cup shortening. 1 teaspoon soda. 1 teaspoon salt. Flour. Dissolve soda in a little hot water. Stir it into molasses. Add milk, lard, and seasoning. Then stir in flour to make a stiff dough. Cut and bake on floured tin in quick oven. Sugar cookies. 1¼ cup sugar, 1 cup butter, 1 cup milk, 2 eggs, ½ teaspoon baking powder, 1 teaspoon vanilla, 1/4 teaspoon salt, flour. Cream the butter, then add the sugar and well-beaten eggs and the other ingredients, beating well. Sift in flour enough to make dough to roll out. Bake in quick oven. Molasses cake. 1 cup molasses, 1 cup shortening, 3/4 cup milk, ½ cup sugar, 3 cups flour, 1 teaspoon salt, 1 teaspoon soda, 1 teaspoon cloves, 2 teaspoons cinnamon, 3 eggs, 1 heaping cup raisins. Heat milk, sugar, and shortening. Stir in seasoning, then molasses with soda that has been dissolved in a little hot water. Next, the flour with raisins, and last, the eggs that have been well beaten. Bake 30 to 40 minutes in ordinary oblong baking tin. Rocks. 1 cup sugar, 3/4 cup butter, 1 teaspoon cloves, 1½ cups flour, 2 eggs, salt, 1 teaspoon cinnamon, 1 heaping cup of nut meats and raisins chopped, or in place of raisins, chopped dates. Sugar cakes. 1 cup powdered sugar, 1 cup flour, 2 teaspoon baking powder, 2 eggs, vanilla, pinch of salt. Beat the eggs well and add the sugar and beat very light. Sift in the flour while beating steadily. Add flavoring if desired. Drop from a small spoon on buttered tin and bake in moderate oven. Cheesecakes. Mix, as for pie crust, 1 cup flour, 4 tablespoons melted lard, a little salt, and 2 heaping tablespoons grated cheese. To moisten, add a little water. Roll out and cut into any shape or size desired. Make a filling by mixing 1 cup grated cheese and yolk of 1 egg. Put a heaping teaspoon full in the center of each piece of crust. Sprinkle with a dash of paprika and a few bits of butter. Moisten the edges of crust. Lay on the upper crust, pressing the edges together. Bake until browned. Donuts. 1 cup sugar, 1 cup sour milk, 1 egg, 1 teaspoon soda, flour, salt, nutmeg. Mix sugar and egg. Add a tablespoon of melted shortening if the sour milk has no cream. Stir in the milk with seasoning and 2½ to 3 cups flour to make a soft dough. Donuts. 1 cup sugar, 1 cup milk, 3 cups flour, 1 egg, 2 tablespoons butter, 1 teaspoon salt, 2 teaspoons baking powder, ½ teaspoon grated nutmeg. Cream the sugar and melted butter in a mixing bowl. Stir in the well-beaten egg, nutmeg, salt, then the milk. Mix and sift the baking powder and flour, and stir in the flour, or enough to make a soft dough. Roll out in sheet about 1/3 of an inch in thickness and cut as desired. Have lard for frying at the right temperature. It should not be smoking hot. Drop a small piece of bread in the frying fat, and if it browns in 3/4 of a minute, the heat is about right for frying donuts. Sweet dreams.